Germany's celebrated energy miracle? Well, it's rapidly approaching a €1 billion breaking point. Right now, there's this massive structural contradiction sitting right at the heart of the country's electricity network. We've got an absolute abundance of clean energy being generated and a huge demand for it. But the physical infrastructure actually connecting the two? It's failing. And look, this isn't just some minor technical glitch. We are talking about a crisis of physics, economics, and politics that could literally reshape the entire European energy landscape. Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive into this. When we say breaking point, we mean billions of euros. Literally. This staggering number represents the exploding annual cost of emergency grid interventions. The market and the physical grid are just so completely out of sync right now that operators are stepping in manually every single day just to prevent a total collapse. And guess what? Taxpayers and consumers are left footing this massive bill, which just keeps growing year after year. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the invisible traffic jam, map out the north-south divide, and look at the controversial idea of splitting the market. Finally, we'll dive into the solidarity problem and zoom out to the broader European context. All right, Section 1, the invisible traffic jam, the reality of Germany's grid. See, Germany currently operates under this illusion of a perfectly unified electricity market. But physically, it's a completely different story. To really grasp the scale of the problem, we've got to talk about Redispatch. Just imagine Germany's power grid as a giant highway system. Every single day, you have these massive trucks full of incredibly cheap wind power trying to travel from the north down to the south. But the highways are simply too narrow. So an invisible traffic jam forms. Because the scheduled power literally cannot physically flow through the existing transmission network, grid operators have to step in and manually reroute things. That continuous emergency intervention, that's what we call Redispatch. And what's really interesting here is the pure absurdity of the situation. During periods of intense wind, to clear that invisible traffic jam, operators actually pay clean northern wind farms not to generate power. They literally pay them to shut their turbines down. But, southern industries still need power, so at the exact same moment, they turn around and pay fossil fuel plants down south to fire up. Let that sink in. We are paying to throw clean energy away while simultaneously paying to burn fossil fuels. And the whole shebang is happening just because the extension cords aren't thick enough. Moving on to Section 2, the North-South Divide, a geographical energy clash. Okay, so Germany has basically split into two completely different energy realities. On one hand, the North has become a massive energy exporter, and that's fueled by some really aggressive, enormous offshore wind development. But the South? The South remains the country's industrial backbone. We're talking automotive, chemicals, heavy engineering, but they lost their stable local generation when they phased out nuclear power. So the geographic mismatch here is just stark. The gap between where power is actually made and where it's desperately needed is widening every single year. Which leads us to this glaring flaw in the system. Why on earth would you build a factory near clean energy if the price is exactly the same everywhere? Seriously, under the current single-zone system, a new energy-intensive factory has absolutely zero financial incentive to pack up and move north near that abundant wind supply. The artificially unified market essentially guarantees them the exact same price down south. So it creates this deeply distorted investment signal that just completely ignores physical reality. Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds. Splitting the market, the two-zone proposal. Because of those distorted signals we just talked about, there's now a massive push to fundamentally rewrite the rules and split Germany into two distinct bidding zones. If this split happens, the economic realities of these two regions diverge practically overnight. The northern zone, they'd get a renewable discount, structurally lower prices where energy-intensive industries, green hydrogen production, and big data centers would just naturally flourish. But the southern zone gets hit with a scarcity premium. Higher electricity costs there would put some really intense margin pressure on those historic industrial clusters. Basically, for the very first time, the market price would actually reflect physical availability. So the crucial point is this really uncomfortable macro-level question. Should industrial geography adapt to energy geography? Should the market force factories to move closer to where the power is actually generated? Or should we prioritize preserving historic industrial maps at any cost, forcing infrastructure to adapt to what's already there? You guys, this isn't just an economic theory anymore. It's the absolute heart of the German political debate right now. Section 4, the solidarity problem, efficiency versus cohesion. Let's look at this totally objectively, starting with the pro-zonal argument. Supporters of the split basically argue that the current single price is, well, a lie. They say that by splitting the market, you finally reveal the true value of localized electricity and enforce some much-needed healthy market discipline. It's kind of a tough love approach, right? Most importantly, they believe that once Southern consumers actually see those higher prices on their monthly bills, it's going to create this unstoppable economic and political pressure to finally fix the grid bottlenecks once and for all. But on the flip side, the opposition, particularly from states like Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, is incredibly fierce. And look, their concerns are very real. They fear that a split will trigger severe industrial erosion, forcing companies to migrate north or just leave the country entirely. They argue, the energy transition was supposed to be a national project, so punishing the South for national infrastructure delays, to them, that's fundamentally unfair. They view splitting the market as a direct threat to Germany's post-war philosophy of equal living standards and national cohesion. And this brilliantly illustrates the root of the entire crisis: SuedLink. SuedLink was supposed to be the great connector. It's this massive high-voltage transmission corridor meant to bring all that northern wind down to southern industry. But SuedLink has been paralyzed. Endless permitting nightmares, intense public opposition, engineering delays. Honestly, if it had just been built on time, this whole zonal pricing debate wouldn't even exist. It's these historic infrastructure failures that have forced this massive issue onto the table. Which brings us to Section 5, the European context, a continental shift. While this might feel like a strictly internal German crisis, Germany's stubborn grip on a single market is actually becoming the exception in Europe, not the rule. Energy doesn't exactly stop at customs, right? Neighbors like Sweden, Norway, and Italy already operate with multiple price zones to manage their own local bottlenecks. They've essentially accepted that regional pricing is just a standard necessary tool for managing a modern, highly complex grid. Furthermore, because Germany sits right at the physical center of Europe's interconnected electricity system, splitting its market would drastically reshape electricity flows across all of these borders. France, Poland, Czechia, Austria, the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, their own energy markets would all be massively impacted by how Germany decides to route and price its power. So what we're looking at is really a continental market redesign, just disguised as a domestic reform. Which leaves us with a final, almost impossible trade-off. Germany is completely out of easy options. Do you continue burning billions of euros to hide grid congestion and maintain this illusion of unity? Or do you split the market, expose the painful reality of physical scarcity, and risk fracturing the industrial heart of Europe? The era of pretending the grid is perfectly unified is officially over. The only question now is who's going to pay the price. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.